Hi, I'm Eric Grant with Sailrite. In this tutorial video, we're going to show you how to cover a Helm chair with a fabric cover that'll protect the vinyl for years to come. And this is a patterned piece, so we're going to show you how to pattern it. And it's really easy. Instead of covering your entire pontoon boat or whatever boat you're working on with a cover that you have to crawl under to put tent poles up, you can actually cover all of your furniture, your vinyl projects, to make them last for years. In this tutorial video, we're going to show you how to do the Helm seat. We have other videos that show you how to do other applications like the bench seats and pedestal seats as well. We have a full tutorial series on how to make covers for your upholstered seats for a pontoon boat. A video for how to pattern and make your own Helm cover. We have a video on making a cover for a pedestal seat, and this is a contoured seat. And finally, how to make a cover for a pontoon bench. This is an L-shaped bench. You'll find links for all of these videos in the description below.
In this first chapter, we'll be patterning the Helm seat.
Okay, to pattern the captain's chair, what I've done is I've taken strapping tape and I went to where I want the cover to be tight, which is up at this corner. We're going to have a panel come down to cover this arm, and then we want the panel to come down here all the way to the front. And then on top of the strapping tape, we put double-sided tape, which we can stick our pattern material to. Then I put double-sided tape. I didn't do it here yet. Let's go ahead and run that here just to show you how to do it. Along the bottom edge. Doesn't have to be exactly in the right spot because it's just going to hold the pattern material in place. Hand me those scissors there, would you? So the strapping tape, the idea of using the strapping tape is that the double-sided tape comes, it doesn't come off of the upholstery vinyl as well as the strapping tape does. So that's why we put the double-sided tape on top of strapping tape. And also the strapping tape that's up in the air down here has no structure to hold it. So that's what the strapping tape is used for. So we have double-sided tape around the entire bottom perimeter. And then if you come back here to the back side, this back panel has double-sided tape on top of the strapping tape that goes all the way down here, because this will be a separate panel down to there. So now that I have this in the general spot, we should have a nice tight-fitting cover. We're ready for patterning. We're going to start with this pattern panel. So this is our first panel, and I've cut some Durascrim to the approximate size of this, a little bit oversized. I'm going to peel off the transfer paper, revealing the double-sided tape all around the perimeter, and we will start patterning this. I've got double-sided tape down here too. There we go. And up here is a piece as well, and it goes all the way down here, so I'm going to peel it off. Okay, so now I usually like to just start at the top. If you're doing this outside, you need to do it on a non-windy day. And I'll stick it down here. And then I'll come down here to the bottom. And I'll pull it fairly taut, trying to work out and make sure that everything is laying nice and flat with as few wrinkles as possible. That looks good there. And if you don't like it, you can always unstick it, like there's a little wrinkle there, and re-stick it down again. Okay, now pull down here, down there, a little bit of wrinkle there. It's a cover. It's not going to be crucial to have a few little wrinkles in like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now that we have that done, I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to mark where we want the stitch or the seam to be for the adjacent panel, which will be the side and even at the bottom. So I'm going to do this. I'm basically on top of the seam that seamed the panel together. We're going to go up here, follow our tape, and this will be a nice, pleasing cover. I don't do solid lines because it's hard to mark solid lines. I do dashes. Okay, and at the top back here, if you look, there is a seam back here. So we're going to go like this, and see there's some wrinkles here. Don't care, it's a cover. Where's that seam? There it is, right there. Don't have to follow the seam, but I'm doing it. I'm going to go around this side, do the same thing, and at the bottom, in the front here, I am going to mark where the edge of the front is. So I could just take a straight edge and do that because we're going to add a fabric panel to the bottom side. So I basically just want to say, hey, where is it transitioning into the bottom side, and mark dashes there as well. And we'll add a sleeve to the bottom. This is the headrest, so the center will be about there. So I'm going to mark it center, and I'm going to mark it top. I'm going to mark out on this, so I know that's the outside. And then at the center down here, from here to here, that is right here. So we're going to mark a line there and call this center, and this is the bottom. Okay, now we're going to do some match-up panels. So the panel over here. So I'm just going to put a line. I'm going to do it right here at the where it intersects the seat. Doesn't really matter, just as long as we have this. We're going to call this A. This is going to be called A when we get another panel on there. And then over here at that same junction, I'm going to call this one B. And we'll have a panel over there as well. Up here at the top, I've got C, so I can just have this panel run into that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut this pattern material pretty close to this, but I want enough material that I can apply double-sided tape again to this so that I can do the side panels and the back panel. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my double-sided tape, now that I've got it cut to size, and I'm going to go in right on the pattern material, but not over top of my dashes, just really close to the dashes. And this way I can pattern and match up the dashes with the second panel that comes down the side. So I'm going to rip my double-sided tape here. I've already got double-sided tape going down. I'm going to peel this off, and I'm going to place a panel here and peel up the double-sided tape that's going back here. Okay, so we have sticky there, and got another panel that's cut to approximately that size, a little bit oversized. And we're going to stick it here and make sure that it's laying as nice as possible. Following this double-sided tape, and then we're going to pull it to the bottom and stick it down there. If I have wrinkles, which I'm going to have here, I'm going to readjust a little bit to get those wrinkles out. And get as many of them out as I can. That's pretty good there. Well, that's nice there, and we'll come around here and we'll stick it back here. Now right here, if you can see that, we have probably a pleat that needs to go in here because there's a lot of excess fabric here. So see how it comes down here and then it goes pleats around that arm and then comes down the side. I'm probably going to make a pleat there, so let me get my marker and I'm going to do this. I'm going to pinch the fabric together so it's behind the arm, and I'm going to go down like this, and then I'm going to go like this right on top of that line, and that will be, it's not right on top but it's close, right on top of that line like that. Okay, so that's going to be my pleat, and then I'm going to go right on top of that seam. You can see that seam if you're happy with the pattern, and I am, and we're going to go all the way up here to where it runs into that, and then we're going to mark on top of the dashes that we have for the front or top plate, so we have an exact size. We'll add seam allowance to it later on, and we're going to do the exact same thing to side B. Here where A is, we're going to draw in our pattern, and we're going to call this A so we know where those two will match up. Go all the way down. And I'm just marking the underside of the chair right where it transitions into the bottom approximately. And we need to keep coming down here. And then this will extend over there, and we'll have that done nicely. Okay, now I'm going to cut away some of this fabric so we can do the back panel. Okay, I put transfer paper up here on top of our pattern material. Notice that we're leaving all the pattern material on. That way we can bark the dashes on top of the adjacent panel. Okay, and I have a piece cut to approximately the back size. Start up here, get it to go down nice and neat. And then over here, wrap it over there. That looks pretty good. Now all we need to do is again mark the center, and this is the top, this is out, and dash marks all the way around. Now we haven't done this side yet, but it's over here. It's done in the same way that this is done. So hopefully that's all you need to know about patterning for a cover like this. Okay, now that we're done, we're going to take it all off, and we're also going to take the tape off of the seat because you can have a chemical reaction, especially in the sun, if it's left on there a long time. I got double-sided tape there. So all this is coming off, and the strapping tape on the vinyl.
In this next chapter, we'll be cutting out our patterns and sewing in our pleats.
Okay, so we have all 4 patterns on the table here, and I'm going to add seam allowance after I cut the patterns out. So I'm just going to basically fair up these lines. If you want to draw another line with a straight edge, you can, but just go across the lines like such. And then obviously this one's going to go, they have a pleat in it, so I'm going to just go straight across here like that. And then we'll cut this pleat out, and then I'll add 1/2 inch seam allowance for this pleat. I'll show you that later on. So we're just cutting right there. And we'll go around now at the bottom over here. We kind of did that roughly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a straight edge, and I'm going to just straighten that out, kind of fairing up the lines. So we're going to do this with all the panels, and we'll add some allowances, and we'll add some at the bottom as well when we go to pattern the fabric. So cut them out just like this for all of them, and I'll show you what's next after that. Okay, I'm using some pins just to pin our pattern material in place, and you'll notice that what I've done is I've left enough to add 1 inch at the bottom and a 3/4 inch around the sides. Now we're not going to be using up 3/4 inch, we're going to use up 1/2 inch, but we don't want this cover to fit too tight. That's why we usually make the seam allowance a little bit bigger than what we're going to be using by 1/4 inch on each panel. So the bottom 1 inch, 3/4 inch on the sides. Now how do I get the 3/4 inch? Let me show you. At the bottom we're going to add 1 inch, and I'm just going to use the clear acrylic ruler for that. And there's no right side or wrong side to this top-notch 7 fabric. So there's 1 inch. On the sides, I'm going to go 3/4 inch. Yes, I know I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but we want this cover to fit loosely. Tight-fitting cover just means you won't use it as much, so that's why we add the extra 1/4 inch, because we're only going to sew a 1/2 inch. So 3/4 inch, and I'm just doing dash marks following the contour of the project. And then, so we're going to do that on all the sides. Now for the dart here, this we're going to actually only take a 1/2 inch. I'm not going to add any extra. I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch. So I'm measuring a 1/2 inch over on this, and we'll cut out the 1/2 inch on these lines, and then we'll sew this together before we start sewing the panel together. So right to there. 3/4 over here, and 3/4 here. Okay, we're going to use a hot knife to help seal the edges, because if you don't, then you'll get unraveling. So I'm going to cut on obviously that line, the little dashes that I will cut on. I'll just go like this between dash and dash. And I'm using the Sayrite Edge hot knife. This is the cordless version, and I have what we call the precision cutting foot and blade on the hot knife, and this means I don't have to worry about damaging the tabletop surface underneath. So we're going to cut all these out, and I'll show you what's next. Oh, also note that I labeled where each one of these matchup marks are with a B, and I will notch those as well. So don't forget to do that, because it'll be confusing to know where everything goes if you don't. Outside surfaces are facing up. Once the panels are cut out for our matchup marks, I use notchers because everything is going to be actually on the other side when we have to match it up. So now I can see it on both sides. So I'll do that for all the matchup marks with the notchers. Regarding any darts, these legs have to be equal distances, otherwise they will not fold right. So if I measure, you can see this one's 3.5 inches to the tip, and if I measure this one, it is a little bit less than 3.5. Now some of them will be more exaggerated. So what I like to do is I like to draw a line down this one, going further than our pattern, and do the exact same thing with this one. This one's pretty close, but there are some that are more exaggerated. And I'll draw a line there, and then what you can do is you can measure the longest line, which is this one, which I said was 3.5, and this one is, well, it's closer to 3, and I'm going to put a mark at 3.5 here. So I'm actually going to cut the fabric and include some extra here. So I'm actually going to go like this and cut the fabric to that point, and we'll sew that together. Then we'll put the pattern back on and we'll cut here, and that way our dart legs are equal. So let's cut it with a hot knife, and you want to do this with all of your darts. They need to have equal lengths. So here's what we're going to do. We'll be cutting on the dash lines everywhere, and then I'll just come up here and I'll just leave extra fabric, and then we'll cut right on the lines like normal. So now I'm going to cut the dart out. I still have that excess fabric all the way to the point, and we're going to take the pattern off and we're going to sew this dart together. So take the pattern off, and then you need to fold it so that outside surfaces are facing each other. So this comes off. So this is the outside surface, it's what we marked, and I'm going to fold this right to the point. And you can see that my fabric is longer over here, which is perfect because we have plenty of fabric. And I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch from this edge. I'm going to do some reversing here, and I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to sew off of here, leaving long tails so we can tie them together at the point. So here's my dart, and I'm going to sew it at a 1/2 inch, and I've reduced the stitch length to about 3 to 4 millimeters, which is what I like. And I'm going to do some reversing here at the end. And then I'm going to sew up all the way at a 1/2 inch away from the needle till I sew off, and I'm going to sew completely off of this point, and then I'm going to leave long tails and cut them that long, and we're going to tie it together. So I'm going to take both of these, and I'm going to do a couple overhand knots and tie it together so that it's secure here at the tip, and it'll look beautiful. So I've laid my dart down flat. There's obviously shape in the panel now. And now I'm just going to take a straight edge, and I'm going to intersect where our panel ends here. My chalk is... So right from here up to here will be a consistent sew line. So we're going to chop that off with a hot knife. And we'll do this for all the darts.
In this chapter, we'll be sewing our panels together.
Okay, so we have B and B and A and top, and you have to think about which is the best order for sewing. Well, this is gonna be sewing all the way around like that. So it's probably better for me to sew this panel on up to the top, and then sew this panel on up to the top. So that's what I'm going to do next, so then I can sew that in all in one sweep. So outside surfaces face each other, B and B. And we know the matchup marks should match up down here, but what is more important is the top edge, not the bottom edge. So I'm going to match this up to the top edge and then splay this out, and we should have a continuing piece of fabric. I actually want to have a little bit of a dog ear like this. So we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew a 1/2 inch from here. Now you could use basting tape, but I don't think I need to. I'm just going to start here. So we have a little dog ear. That's typical. That's why I leave a dog ear. And I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch from this edge. So right now I'm at about a 1/2 inch, and I'm sewing about a it's actually a 4 millimeter straight stitch. with a size number 16 needle and Tech 70 thread. Make sure you do some reversing here, go off your fabric and then sew onto your fabric. And all you want to do is just match up the edges as you sew, especially across from the needle. I'm going to put the Deluxe 5.5-inch magnetic guide down here to make it easier for sewing. That way I don't have to pay attention to that 1/2-inch mark. And we'll sew all the way to the bottom edge and do some reversing. Notice the bottom edge isn't perfectly matched up. That's no big deal. We added an extra inch in it. And if your matchup marks are slightly off, don't worry about that either, as long as they're close. All right, that one's done. Now we're going to sew the other side on in the same manner. Let's go to the table. So now we're going to take the A and A outside surfaces face each other. We're going to leave a little bit of a dog ear up here like that, and we're going to start sewing 1/2 inch from there. You'll have a slight dog ear at the top, which we intended to have, and I'm just going to trim it so that it's flush, and we'll do the same thing to the other one. Nice. Now we're going to take this back panel and flip it, and we're going to start sewing in the center going one direction, and then we'll flip it and sew the other direction. So we want to start sewing at the center. Outside surfaces are facing each other. Match-up marks should be directly over top of each other. Let's take the machine and we'll sew this direction first. So the match-up marks are on top of each other and the edges are lined up. I'll do a little bit of reversing here at the beginning. And we'll sew this direction, matching up edges. We'll either splay this to the left or the right. It's going to obviously go towards me, just because that's where it's laying friendly like. You just want to match these up as you go. Make sure this is splayed out. So I'm going to splay this out a little bit. And you just want to make sure there's no wrinkles in your seam allowance as you sew, following the contour. C's are almost lined up with each other. That's great. We have another, this is the dart right here. We're just going to let it go forward for this one. That's where it wants to land. Pretty easy. We get to the bottom, we'll do some reversing, and we're a little bit off there, no big deal. Okay. What we do now, after we're done doing this, is we take this panel out and we flip it upside down so that we don't have the bulk of the fabric in there, and we just start sewing at our center a little bit on top of these previous stitches, and we sew down the other side in the exact same manner. So right about here, making sure you're not sewing in any of the cover fabric, so you can feel that I'm only sewing through 2 layers here. We'll do a little bit of reversing here at the top, and then we'll make sure that we are matching up the edges as we sew this direction. Pretty easy. So now at the bottom edge, that's where I'm at right now on the inside. I'm going to go and cut off anything that's slightly off a little bit, and don't be alarmed by this. We added extra fabric and we also marked the bottom edge kind of roughly. So I'm going to be trimming that with a hot knife. This one over here is pretty close. No, it needs to be trimmed too, because it's a little bit off over here. So this is all we do to trim the bottom and to make it so that it transitions from one panel to the next. So now we're going to make a strip that goes around the bottom edge with a shock cord in it. And we know that this is going to be more than 60 inches, so I'm going to secure together 2 60-inch strips, and we're going to make that shock cord sleeve so we can sew it onto this.
Coming up, we're going to be creating our sleeve with SuperShok.
On the bottom of our cover, we're going to have a shock cord in a sleeve. And it's really easier to make your own sleeve that you sew on and install the shock cord. So I've used a clear acrylic ruler, and I struck 2 lines that are 5 inches apart from each other. And I have 2 strips because we need enough to go around the entire perimeter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a clear acrylic ruler and mark it at 3 inches, because we're going to have this as our shock cord sleeve. So this is our 3-inch lines where we're going to take this and we're going to fold up to the line to create our sleeve. So 2 strips should go around the perimeter nicely. 3-inch on this one and 3-inch on this one. Okay, we have outside surfaces facing each other to join these 2 strips together, and the lines are obviously directly across from each other, which is important. If they're not, just start from the other end. We're just going to match up this edge and sew a hidden stitch that is right here, doing some reversing, a 1/2 inch from the edge, sew down, and do reversing here. Okay, so now that's joined together. Now we're going to insert our shock cord. Okay, we have to think about where we're going to put the 1/2 inch hem to fold this over. And what I want to do, what I know I'm going to do is I'm going to put the shock cord in this side like this, which means this is going to be sewn onto our plate, which means this is the right side. So you want the 3-inch, the line that's 3 inches to be to the left of the sewing machine. And this is the right end. If it isn't, if this is on the other side, flip it around. So we're going to fold this to a 1/2 inch in approximately. Well, it's more than a 1/2 inch. I'll probably fold it to about 3/4 of an inch. And then we'll create a stitch that's a 1/2 inch from the fold to, this is where our shock cord is going to exit out of the sleeve. So we're going to sew reversing and all the way down, and then reverse at the bottom. This gives a nice finished end. Okay, now we can insert our shock cord. This is not your ordinary shock cord. It's called SuperShok, 3/16 inch size. This doesn't wear out like the other shock cord, so it's phenomenal. I highly recommend it. So we're going to just leave a little bit sticking out. I'm going to use a grip clip just to hold the shock cord in place. That way I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to put it into the sewing machine, and we're going to fold up to that chalk line. And I'm going to use the right side of the foot as my guide here, which puts the stitch at 3/8 inch from the cut. And I'm going to reverse heavily here. And then I'm just going to put the SuperShok inside the sleeve and match up the line and sew all the way down its length. I am using a Tech 70 thread with this fabric because it's fairly light, and I'm using a size 16 needle. When I get to the area where the 2 pieces were joined together, I'm just going to take my seam allowance and I'm going to splay it out like a little butterfly. So cute. And then fold it over so that just reduces the bulk. And then we'll sew right through that.
Next up, we'll be sewing the sleeve to the bottom edge.
This is my front panel, and I've taken a Sayrite tag, and at the middle position, you can see the little notch there, I sewed this on inside my seam allowance because my seam allowance is going to be 1/2 inch. This indicates where the front of the cover is. Now we're going to switch this to the back side, the back panel, which is right here, and we are working on the outside surface. You can tell that because the seams are obviously pretty. And we're going to take our piece that we just made. So at the center position in the back, I'm going to lay this so that the seam is almost at that back notch position. And then I'm going to just sew a 1/2 inch from the edge, matching up the panel, reversing here at the beginning, all the way around, making sure that I'm only sewing through the bottom edge. So this sews on that shock cord strip that you just made. We'll put the magnetic guide down. There we go. Match up the edge, sew around. Pretty easy. Okay, we've come around to where we began, and I'm going to cut this panel so that it's a little bit over so I can create a hem here. And I don't want to cut through my shock cord, so I'm going to get my scissors, and you could use a hot knife for this, and I'm going to cut about 1 inch or so past that point, going perpendicular to the edge. My shock cord is right here, so I'm going to cut up into that, and then I'm going to move my shock cord down with my fingers, insert my scissors on the other side, and cut through all the way. Okay, so now we can get rid of this little piece that's left over, and then I want to rip up some stitches all the way to about here so that I can create a 1/2 inch hem. So I'm just folding the fabric, and make sure you have enough fabric that you can work with it. and creating that hem. I'm going to lose my thread if I don't hold it. There, I got it. Reverse it. A little bit more than a ½ inch, but that's okay. Okay, so now that we have that done, I can put it back into the sleeve and sew this sleeve shut, which we need to do now. So I'm going to sew from here to here, reversing right there. We have that hem in there, and it ends up just about perfect. So I'm going to put sewing this shut here, and now I'm going to start on top of my previous stitches, doing some reversing, and then we're going to sew the remainder of this on. And even if they overlap a little bit, that's quite all right. They're not going to. And when we get to here, we'll just sew over it, and we'll reverse pretty heavily there. And there we go. We have an opening for our shock cord.
In this final chapter, we'll be installing the cover on our Helm seat.
So now I'm going to pull out some shock cord to reduce it, and I've clipped one side, and I'm just going to pull on this and create wrinkles in the fabric, and I'm going to distribute the wrinkles around the perimeter. And I'm going to pull out probably around 2 feet of the shock cord so they get nice tension. And we don't know if this is going to be perfect or not until we get out to the boat, but we'll check it out. I'm not going to cut my shock cord. I'm just going to do a couple overhand knots. These are not going to be the knots that were used. Not, get it? But it's enough to test it to see if it's right, and then I'll show you the knot that we're going to use finally. Let's go to the boat. Okay, so our first testing, there's our tag, so we know where the front is. And do we have too little or too much shock cord? I'd probably say we probably go around the arms here. Looks like it might be okay. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'd say that's about the right amount of shock cord tension. So nice. So now I'm going to take it off, and I'll show you how to tie a permanent knot. Well, it's not permanent. It's one that can be undone, but it won't give loose like this overhand knot will. So I'm going to remove the knot that will not hold well, and we're going to do a Zeppelin bend at this locale. So try to remember where you are. You may want to mark your shock cord if you think it's too difficult. And I do like to leave a little bit of extra line. So I'm going to go ahead, so I don't have to work with as much line, I'm going to leave about 4 inches of line, maybe 6 inches, and cut it with scissors. And so I'm going to create a loop here, and then on this side, this is a Zeppelin bend. I'm going to create a loop going underneath, so like this. Okay, so there, one's on top and one's underneath. Then I'm going to take the legs, and I'm going to go through here like that, and then this leg is going to go obviously underneath and through like that, and that is a Zeppelin bend. And it does not come loose, or it does not come loose on its own, but it's easy to undo, so you can make adjustments. So let's test it one more time for fit. And if we're happy, we're going to leave those tails long. The SuperShok has a solid core. You can't sew through it. And we can't really melt the core, but I do like to melt the sleeve on the outside with a hot knife, and that prevents it from unraveling. It stinks like crazy when you do this. There we go. Okay, the tag's in front. I'm going to pull this down to get it on the underside in the back. And if it's, there we go. And then I'm going to take this, go over the arms, go over the back, and there we go. We have a seat cover that the water is just going to shed right off of, and it really looks good, including even those darts here. There's that dart which took up that excess fabric. Very nice. Chalk marks will come off with a rag and water.
Our Helm seat cover is now complete, and it looks great. You can find a full list of the tools and materials used in this video in the description below. Also, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to be notified when new videos are made available. From all of us here at Sailrite, I'm Seth Grant. Thanks for watching.